The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm Dr. Mark Bound, and I'm here with our panel, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon and Dr. Scott Gershwer. And today we are joined by a special guest, Dr. John D. Gartner. And Dr. Gartner is an American psychologist and psychotherapist known for his work in mental health, particularly regarding borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder. He is also recognized for his activism, notably his criticism of President Donald Trump's mental fitness for office. So, interesting conversation. Let's listen in. Yeah, so we do not have questions today because as of last night, of course, I get the emails. Everything has been about the blue wave, I guess they're calling it. From last night. So one of the things Brooklyn brought up, because we were going to talk to you about, the duty uniform and all that stuff, and I would like to do that at a later time. I think that would be great. But as Brooklyn said, you may have some insights as to what Trump's reactions might be to this kind of devastating slap in the face. How you see his personality, how he's going to, deal with this. Now, my attitude is I think he's going to act like a 5-year-old. Of course, that's always my attitude.
Well, he always acts like a 5-year-old.
And I have a question.
Yes.
I do have a question for you, John. Why does Trump always refer to himself in the third person? Is that part of the narcissistic personality disorder? But has he always done that? Like from back in
It's kind of like a royal we, isn't it? It's really, I think it's part of his grandiosity. That he's speaking about himself as if he's some kind of, historic figure. It's an odd way of speaking, but I think it relates more to his narcissism. Like, speaking about the great Trump, like the great Oz,
Yeah. I mean, it does kind of take us back to Queen Victoria. We are not amused. I mean, it's just,
exactly.
It seems like an odd, and let's face it, I don't give him a lot of credit in his ability to use English. I know that Helmut Kohl, who was the German chancellor, if you asked any German, would tell you that his German was atrocious. He was a decent chancellor, but his German was bad. With Trump, he's not a decent president, and his English is horrible to go along with it. And I guess, what do you see? I mean, this had to be a rebuke. I mean, it truly had to be a rebuke. And how does somebody with Trump's personality, how did they rectify that in their own grandiose mind?
Right. Well, it certainly was a rebuke. I mean, if you look at the micro data, every county in every state shifted Democratic. Even the ones that voted red, they still shifted to the left. So it was really a resounding rebuke. Not only was it all the elections, but it was all the counties in all the states that had elections. It's huge. So right now we're really in a race between his dropping poll numbers and their increasing dictatorial control over society and over the electoral process. They are working round the clock to rig the 2026 election. And so if it's an honest election, it will be a blue wave. But they're doing everything they can to stop that. Some of the things are things we can see, right? The attempt to gerrymander themselves into a majority because they know they can't win it honestly. Others, I'm afraid, are things that we can't see. Putting election deniers, for example, in charge of elections, pretty much assume that they're going to call in some kind of play where those people are then going to say that the election was rigged if the Republican loses, or they're going to hold back some mail-in votes. And then finally, the thing that we can't see that's my biggest nightmare is that something is happening downstream with the vote counting software. Elon Musk made these oblique comments that he helped, before the election. He said, well, Musk and I have a plan that's going to help me win. I'll tell you about it later. And it sounded like more some sort of data manipulation. And actually the company, I'm blocking up their name now. See
Dominion?
In a moment. No, not Dominion. The company that actually makes the software that counts the votes, not the machine.
Is that them?
I think it's a different one. I'll have to look it up.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll get that.
We'll get that. I'm sorry, I should have that.
Palantir?
Yeah.
But
is it Palantir, or is that the name of the company?
No, it's not Palantir.
As far as we're concerned, it could be Atari for all we know right now.
Well, no, it's a company that very few people have heard of, so that's why it's not coming right, to mind as I mentioned this. But everyone who is affiliated with the company is MAGA. Everyone, all the senior people in the administration, senior people in the company were in the Trump administration. So this is the company that's counting the votes in the majority of states. There were irregularities in the 2024 election. There's some weird thing where they had a statistically discrepant number of people who had what they call blank votes, where they don't vote for president, just down ballot. So that might be one little way they could manipulate things. Just take out the presidential vote for some of the blue voters. I really find it very suspicious that he allegedly won every swing state. So I'm already worried that there's already some data manipulation. And if that's true, we're kind of dead men walking. We think we're still in a democracy, and we still have time to vote out the Republicans. May actually be too late.
It's kind of funny that when we talk about rigging an election, again, it takes a certain personality to have the desire to win so strong in their personality that it overrides everything that's logical. I mean, I'm a golfer myself, and when I saw that guy drop the golf ball for him, that was definitely lost in the weeds. All I could think of was, "You got to be kidding me." I mean, sometimes you just take your lumps, and because that's what golf is. And the fact is that even the people around him know they have to cheat for him. That's a personality that I can't get.
It's mind-boggling to you. It's mind-boggling to you because you're a relatively normal person. Okay,
well,
and what's hard for you to understand, it's hard to understand how a psychopath thinks if you're not a psychopath. I know this gets into this topic of, my diagnosis of Donald Trump, but he clearly meets all the criteria for psychopath or antisocial personality disorder. That's just one of the diagnoses. I think he meets for a larger syndrome called malignant narcissism. But the point is, that's what psychopaths do. They cheat. They lie, they steal, they violate the rights of others, they exploit others, and they feel no guilt or anxiety about it. So you're going, I don't know how somebody could do that. Yeah, well, you just passed a very important diagnostic test. You're not a psychopath.
Well, Scott, are you happy to hear I'm not a psychopath? No, you're not. You don't even care. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's exactly what.
I think that there's a big danger in diagnosing Mark from this distance. I don't know if I think it's true about Trump, but I do know it's definitely true about Mark.
So I have a question. Sorry to burst in. I've had a burning question for a while. I mean,
then let's get it off your chest. Come on.
Yeah, thank you. So my late partner had a VAD, an LVAD, and he had an ischemic stroke that was around here, and it gave him global aphasia, and it also created impulsivity and some other issues. Yeah. So I have it was horrible trying to take care of him. Now, how, based on your expertise and how Trump's progression is going now, I have a couple of questions. What should our listeners are very savvy. What should they be aware of and listening for as they listen to Trump's interviews, like in a 60-minute interview and so on and so forth, assuming these things are not being cut? If anything is live, what should they be listening for? And maybe if they're taking notes or reading the transcripts, that shows progression, so that our listeners are understanding what's happening and not being persuaded by Carolyn Levitt or whatever, trying to wash or whitewash this. And based on your experience, how rapidly might something like this, and I realize this requires some speculation, based on your experience, what type of decline do you expect to see? I mean, how long does something like this take until this can no longer be hidden and it's so obvious? Or can they hide it and we never have an Article 25? What happens? And is Vance worse? I mean, right now we've got Miller, right?
Well, there's a lot in your question. I love the way you started talking about these interviews. They do edit them, right, to sane wash them. Actually, if you watch an entire entire unedited interview, his cognitive decline is much more evident and blatant. And actually, you mentioned him being bad at English. He actually used to be, if you look at his speech in the 1980s, he actually used to be quite articulate. And he would speak not just in complete sentences, but polished paragraphs. One of the ways that we diagnose cognitive decline or dementia is by comparing people to their own baseline. And so, in fact, he has deteriorated an immense amount from his own baseline in terms of his reading level, vocabulary. It's gone from like 12th grade to like 3rd grade. In terms of hard signs of dementia, which would be things like tangential thinking, using phonemic paraphasia. That's where you can't even get out a word. You use a word that sounds like the word, but you can't finish the word, so you just kind of end it with a syllable or two. We've seen examples of that from him ongoingly. You probably saw supercuts of him making mispronunciations during the campaign, but he just tweeted out this week, South Cara did. I mean, that's a phonemic paraphasia in writing, which you don't see that often. His tangential thinking, and this is where the unedited speeches are helpful. You see him go really through a period of loose associations, really, from one topic to another without any explanation. Like, for example, the one I like to use as an example, and I can give you a more current example, the one that's very illustrative. And he says, they're bringing in immigrants from insane asylums. Anyone here seen Silence of the Lambs? That's a movie about an insane asylum. So now we've gone from immigrants coming from insane asylums to a movie about an insane asylum. And he goes, the late, great Hannibal Lecter. They don't talk about him anymore. Okay, so now we've gone from a movie about an insane asylum to saying that the character is actually alive. I mean, a true biographical figure who has died. Okay, and now because he idolizes evil people, like so a serial killer who would eat people would be like a hero of his. Yeah, they don't want to talk about him anymore, but he was great. Okay, so there's a lot revealed in that little sequence, but you see it over and over again, especially in these unedited speeches. So but you said, what's it going to take, right? If he's just babbling nonsensically on stage, is that what it's going to take? I've been asking that question for over a year, and I finally decided he is babbling nonsensically now, and it's not enough. It's not enough. I used to think, well, is that what it's going to take? Well, actually, that's not enough.
Brooklyn and Scott both know, this duty to act thing. I having studied bioethics, being that my master's focus, I have an issue with it. Just to be info. Do I think that he's batshit crazy? Yes, but I'm a social political conflict anthropologist. I'm not making a diagnosis in any way, but we'll get to I would love to explore that at a different time. I think the reason
I have an answer for you, obviously.
Well, all right. Well, maybe we can hit on it, but I mean, the fact is that if you watch Fox News, if that's where you get your information, they do everything they can to present him in the best light. Mm-hmm. You don't hear the rambling on Fox News.
Right.
If you watch MSNBC or one of the other outlets, that's all you hear. So the assumption is given to the viewer that he's either one way or the other. Very few people actually get the opportunity to hear a full, unedited presentation, because they're always getting it from the same echo chamber that they go to. So I think that's one of the reasons why, as Brooklyn asks, I think that's one of the reasons why this may not be enough, only because you're talking to a very large audience that watches Fox, who always sees this guy as perfectly fine.
I think even MSNBC and CNN, New York Times, the Washington Post, even the so-called left-wing mainstream media is still sane-washing him and still not showing it in its full glory or florid expression. And I think that's really important. For example, you will not see a mental health professional on any of those outlets even asked the question,
right,
does he have a disorder? Is he showing signs of dementia? They won't even go there to ask the question. Finally, when we got this White House second physician report, we learned some things, and we learned what they are not telling us. We learned that he didn't just take one cognitive test. He took a battery of cognitive tests, because he keeps talking about the cognitive tests, plural, that he took that he allegedly AOC couldn't pass. We learned that he had an MRI. Okay, so I know you're going to at some point want me to defend myself. Well, how can I diagnose him without having seen him? But the doctors who have seen him The doctors who are examining him are putting him through a battery of tests that we never, ever, ever, ever give to a patient unless we suspect serious cognitive decline. We just don't do it. It's not part of an executive physical. We just don't do it. You don't give someone a brain MRI unless you suspect there's something wrong with their brain, except they won't tell us why they're giving him this test, and they won't tell us what the results are. But finally, they did have an actual doctor, a GW doctor on one of the news services saying, well, doctor, why would you give someone an MRI? And he said exactly what I just said to you. They're not telling us why, but we never give it unless there's a serious problem. They're not telling us the truth. So finally, there was something, I guess, that was hard enough that it was news that they could report on it because it came out of the White House and they said they gave him these tests. They didn't really quite go into the implications. But other than that, it's almost verboten. They can't even talk about it. They can't even ask the question.
Well, and I'll tell you something. One of the things that whenever you watch a trial, the last thing any attorney wants to get involved into is the battle of the experts. That's just because for every expert you can say this, you got the other side that can get an expert to say that, say something totally different. We understand that with Gorka, who's constantly on Fox News and basically has, in our mind, no credibility whatsoever. However, I mean, no, zero. Yeah, totally zero. Zero.
He's a co-conspirator.
And it's not a matter of defending it. It truly is not. Problem I have is that once we enter in where medical professionals who are in the mental health field, you have your position, and I totally agree with it. I have no issue with it whatsoever. But they're going to find somebody equally credible, hopefully in their mind, that's going to dispute that, but on the other network. And and again, we are so limited to the information that we receive, and now you're lending the medical profession, which I find to be a terribly honorable profession. They're steeped in ethical considerations and ethical rules. Now you're basically throwing them into a fight, a political fight. Now let's face it, the AMA and the APA they're just not ready for it. Let's remember the Goldwater rule. Look how much crap that created simply because somebody went in there and said, well, yeah, I think that this guy is, and it turned out he was a mental health professional, and then that blew into an entirely new rule that they came up with, which they upheld in 2017 because there was more of this. So it's not a matter of asking somebody to defend it. It's not a matter of asking somebody to justify it. The thing is how do we combat that sense of how do we not drag the medical profession down into the mud of politics? How can we possibly do that and preserve one of the last great institutions we still have, the medical profession?
Well, I disagree with your premise about experts because this is an intellectual podcast. Right? This is for people who like to think, right? And what we're seeing is that truth itself is under attack, right? Science is under attack. Our ability to verify things in some objective way is under attack. And one of the ways to do that is to disqualify experts. Oh, they're eggheads. They don't know what they're talking about. Oh, they're all biased. They don't know what they're talking about. So therefore, you're disqualifying their capacity to present verifiable truths. Now, as far as the Goldwater rule is concerned, you're right. It's from the APA, and the APA defends the guild of psychiatry. Okay. And, one of the things is it doesn't, by the way, say that you cannot diagnose a patient that you haven't examined. We actually can diagnose a patient we haven't examined, and that is perfectly fine. Normally we try to examine them, but since the new DSM is based on observable behavioral criteria, there are times when you will make a diagnosis talking to the family, observing the patient, and not interviewing them, and that's no big deal. The Goldwater rule only picks one group of people that you can't comment on, and that's public figures.
Correct.
Why? Because public figures could then punish the profession or hurt the profession in some way. And that 2017 reaffirmation of the Goldwater rule that you're talking about took place at an ethics committee meeting at their convention that one of my colleagues attended, John Zinner, and he was quoted in the New Yorker as saying that the head of the committee said, we've got to double down on the Goldwater rule. Otherwise, Trump is going to reduce our third-party payments. That was quoted in the New Yorker. Okay. Then later he said he was joking. You know, Trump's always joking when he says the truth.
Course.
He wasn't joking. Okay. So first of all, let's just kind of be clear. This is a cover your ass for the profession thing, not some high-minded ethics thing, in my view. In fact, we also have another ethical principle in our profession called the duty to warn, which is that as a psychologist, if we know that someone is in danger, we have a duty to warn them. We're mandated reporters legally. Okay. Well, so therefore, if we have a duty to warn one person, what about 400 million people? Would we have a duty to warn them? Because that's my view, is that we had a higher ethical duty to warn the populace about this meteor heading towards planet Earth. And it's like when you see the rise of a Hitler, okay, when is it more ethical to say nothing?
First of all, let me be very clear. I completely agree with the diagnosis of the whole thing. And I firmly believe that because somebody's a psychiatrist or psychologist, they are still allowed to have their political views. Absolutely. That right should not be taken away from them.
I'm talking about. These are medical views.
I know. But to influence maybe a political view. Let's face it. If a psychiatrist comes on and says, "Hey, Donald Trump's batshit crazy," that's going to influence a lot of people as to how they vote. There's a potential there for that. My attitude is very, very simple. They should have their ability to express their opinion as to their personal opinion and observations that they would make that would be understandable to the layman, I guess is the way I would put it. And you're right. Very rarely do you see them bring on somebody from the medical profession. I know Sanjay Gupta, whenever they talk to him, and he was going to be the surgeon, he was considered for the Surgeon General at one point in time. Whenever he talks, he never makes a diagnosis. He says, okay, it could be this, it could be this. And he goes, just like what you said, he goes through the process of it, of how a determination could be made in a way that the layman could follow along with it, could totally follow along with it. And I think that's totally appropriate because that allows a person to bring their expertise into the conversation without unduly emphasizing the professional status of what they have. And again, for me, I'm perfectly fine with that. My issue is with the Trump issue is that there is so much there, John, for you guys to look at. How do you sort through it all? I mean, at what point in time do you basically say this is just batshit crazy? I mean, which is, as a social political anthropologist, I could say batshit crazy. You probably can't. But the fact is at what point in time, with all of you, all this stuff, it's like there's this plethora of information that you have. How do you?
There is a plethora of information. And the other issue with the Goldwater rule, just to give you a little bit of history. Right. So in 1965, there was a defunct magazine called Fact Magazine, surveyed some psychiatrists and published an article saying Goldwater is mentally unstable, which actually was untrue. He was conservative. Right. He was not mentally unstable.
Right.
And yet he lost the election, kind of to your point, in part because people had the impression that he was unstable. And Johnson basically exploited that. If you remember the famous Daisy ad, right? Right. We're old enough to remember these things. Okay. And it was very effective. He sued the magazine. He won $75,000. And I actually interviewed the person who was on that APA's first ethics committee that passed the Goldwater rule. And one of the reasons they did is that the statements that were made, this is in the era of Freudian psychiatry. I mean, we still have Freudian psychiatry, but when that was sort of the dominant worldview. Right. And they were saying things like he had been scarred by his potty training. He was a latent homosexual. He had hatred towards his mother. It was, these very sort of psychoanalytic speculations that you couldn't know without actually being someone's therapist. And so that they had a lot of legitimate reasons for saying that wasn't okay. the person I interviewed who was on the committee, Alan Dyer, said, well, because we didn't want people making irresponsible statements or statements that weren't covered by facts. We weren't trying to put a permanent gag order on this one specialty of medicine when all the other specialties can say whatever they want. It's the only one that's, if someone breaks their leg on TV in a football match, you're not going to be objective. An orthopedic surgeon says, it looks like a broken leg to me.
No, absolutely not.
But in the 80s, we adopted a new diagnostic system with the DSM-3. And Robert Spitzer's mission in creating the DSM-3 was to have objective, observable behavioral criteria. So we would have objective diagnoses that would be reliable. But if it's an objective, observable behavior, if I have a plethora of observations, I can check the boxes. For example, just one of the diagnoses that we've been discussing, antisocial personality disorder. The first criteria is lying. Well, Donald Trump is the most documented liar in all of recorded human history. Show me the one who's even a close second. The Washington Post stopped counting after 30,000 lies, and that was in his first administration. So I don't need to interview Donald Trump to tell you that he meets criteria number one. Okay, and we could go down the list. Does he break laws and norms? Yes, he's a convicted felon. That's simply a fact. He breaks laws. Okay. Does he violate the rights of others? He's an adjudicated sex offender. It is a known fact that he violates rights of others. You don't have to be a mental health professional to read those simple, common sense English sentences and know that he has met that criteria. So this whole idea of like, well, you couldn't possibly know, you haven't interviewed him, is bullshit.
Oh, no. I honestly don't think that there's the idea of interviewing him. Please, that is not it. My comment is, my whole position in this is that, somebody could call up the Goldwater rule. Somebody could call up the rule about duty to warn. And the way that they are worded, somebody that was like really looking into it basically speaks to the doctor-patient relationship that is going on there. That's the reason. Duty to warn. That's if they are a patient. In the way that it's written in some cases.
Yes, it's an extension.
And some people, and this is where I go back to the layman. The layman can then get a complete, your argument's totally logical and totally valid. But to the layman, they say, well, wait a minute, it says this. That is not what's going on here. And again, maybe what has to happen is that the code of ethics for not only the AMA, the APA, and whoever else dictates these organizations, these medical professions, needs to do a little bit of rewording. And it would be very nice if the AMA, especially like during COVID, if they had been a little bit more, no, we're not injecting bleach into people. If they had been a little bit more, upfront with that, that might have been a very nice thing to see. And they weren't. I mean,
we had a thoughtful over Deborah Brooks's head while he was saying all the people who rejected. You could see she was dying. She wanted.
And I mean, that poor lady. I can't remember her name. That was, that Deborah poor lady. That was, oh my God, she was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I get it. So sometimes it's a matter of if the profession itself steps up. And takes the logic and the process that you just put there and lays it down and says, hey, you know what? This is okay. Then I think that would dispel a lot of the issues that can come out from somebody just going on, a layman reading, the plain language of it and saying, wait a minute, that's wrong. That,
So the American people are being gaslit, okay? And one
absolutely.
of the ways of being gaslit is what you described in terms of the Fox News phenomena, right? Because they're getting this curated news from a certain point of view. And that is, in a macroscopic level, that's the bigger problem, right? In other words, Trump could, eat a live baby on Fifth Avenue and they would somehow just reframe it as if it was somehow something good. So that propaganda effect, right? It's sort of like the Ash experiment, like they'll look at 2-3 lines and two are shorter than the other one. But if they have a crowd of people saying, no, the shorter line is longer, they'll be influenced. Right. So it's really amazing how fungible and flexible our perception of reality is. And if we get a diet of propaganda, it definitely distorts things. But with regard to this specific issue, think about the Venn diagram here, okay? Mm-hmm. How are people going to find out that the president of the United States is insane if the people who have the expertise to say are gagged and the people who say don't have the expertise or the authority to say it?
Exactly.
The Venn diagram means there are 0 people.
Exactly, which is why I say the APA, the AMA, they should, as an organization, step up.
Well, won't get an argument from me.
I didn't think I would, but I'll go back to the original. Let me go back to the original question.
They've been stepping down. They haven't been stepping up.
No, well, pretty much. Well, actually, you've been hiding they've been hiding.
They've been hiding.
Pretty much hiding. So let me go back to the original question when we first started this, because I know Brooklyn told me you have to go shortly. So knowing what you know and knowing the past behaviors of Trump, after this blue wave that we're all going to agree happened, now we all know how we expect him to act. I think we started this out with me saying he's going to act like a 5-year-old that just lost the ball game on the playground. Do you see any potential, because his condition has in many ways evolved? Do you see this manifesting itself anyway in a way that might surprise us and that we should be even more concerned about?
Well, of course, he'll never accept blame or feel, that he lost. The nature of his narcissism is he has to project anything negative on. It was I forget who said this, but everything with him is projection or confession. Either he's simply saying it and out loud, and now it's okay, he's normalizing it, or he's projecting it outward. AOC is dumb. No, AOC is not dumb. He's the one who's got cognitive decline, and so what he's probably going to do is lash out and project outward and declare victory and use it, what he's also been using, as an excuse to double down and hurt people even more. That's what he's been, that's what he's doing with the government shutdown. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He's using it as an excuse to wreak even more destruction. And that's what he's going to continue to do. So whatever or what they did with the murder of Charlie Kirk, right? That became sort of the casus belli, that sort of, like a lot of people don't know, Kristallnacht, the thing that started Kristallnacht was there was a Jewish man killed a German soldier. We don't know I don't know the details, but that was the casus belli, like the Reichstag fire, that gave them an excuse to seize power. Okay. And so they used the Charlie Kirk murder as an excuse, right? To say, we're looking at everyone's social media now, and you better not say anything bad about Charlie Kirk. So whether it goes up, down, or sideways, they use it. Even the defeats are actually very good, can be very good excuses, right? For declaring some bogus national state of emergency to grab more power and to attack and harm more innocent people.
So you basically see it just more of the same. It's just going to intensify.
Yeah.
Scott?
I think the more important thing is to ask this. He gets people to go along with him, and I don't understand how, but he gets people to go along with him. HIPAA cannot apply to the U.S. president, right? There can be no privacy when it comes to the medical people who were in the room with him, who were giving him these cognitive tests, who are seeing what we see, right? They're not speaking up. And so there's something wrong here. And they may feel that they have a responsibility for the patient's privacy, that we can't talk about it. But I would say that national security overrides that. I don't know if that's legally or ethically correct, but it seems to me that, well, in a sense, it's like the contrast between two characters in Dr. Strangelove. The one who shoots the missiles and sends out the bombers, right? Who is clearly insane. And we see it throughout the entire movie when he's talking about
bodily fluids,
water and fluoridation and stuff like that, right? We know he's batshit crazy. Right. But then we have George C. Scott in the war room, and he's batshit crazy, but he's in charge. He's one of the people in charge. And nobody is like going, why aren't we throwing this guy out of the room? We all know that he's every bit as crazy as the General Ripper is, right?
Yeah, with his mind shift.
I think you're putting your finger very much on a central issue, which is we're being lied to. This is a dementia cover-up, okay? Which is they're not telling us the two pieces of information that the American people deserve. Why are you giving him an MRI and a neuropsychological battery? And what did you find? It's very relevant. If you don't want to listen to John Gartner because he's not following the Goldwater rule, fine. Then can the doctors who are actually examining him give the American people that information, because it's a matter of national security. We need to know these things. I mean, this is a guy who sort of wakes up and says, I think I'll go to war with Venezuela today. Now, or maybe another country that starts with V. I don't know. It's very arbitrary and impulsive, and he's arbitrary and impulsive to begin with. This is what happens with dementia. People become more impulsive and more erratic and more disorganized. So he's negotiating with the prime minister. This just happened this week, right? He's negotiating with the prime minister of Canada over tariffs, but then the premier of Ontario posts a social media video accurately recording Ronald Reagan's voice saying he was against tariffs. Okay. Trump calls off the negotiations with the Prime Minister of Canada because he's offended by a social media post from another politician who happens to live in the same country. I mean, that is really like an erratic, impulsive, crazy, right? Kind of. So we really have a mad king, but he's even worse, a mad king who's a mad, demented king. And even worse, we have a mad, demented king who has no guardrails around him. And a mad, demented king who was essentially a malignant actor. Okay. It's really like a perfect storm of all of the worst risk factors that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
And it's only getting worse because he's getting worse. Well, that's one thing about cognitive decline. It only goes in one direction. And so I always say to people, look at Donald Trump today. That's the best Donald Trump you're ever going to see, because he's only getting worse. And we're seeing it now. It used to be we would collect these materials, and finally it was like every week there was new stuff. If we had more time today, one of the things I had wanted to do was read you a transcript of some of the things that he has been saying. And when you actually listen to them unedited, it literally makes absolutely no sense, whatsoever. It's completely it's completely I'm looking for it. There's no connecting thoughts.
Welcome to our world. We always put stuff on the screen. We can never find it when we're going looking for it.
I'll just give you one example. When he was on the aircraft carrier, he said, I really don't like it, good-looking people. I never admitted that before. I shouldn't say that. He goes, but now I can, because I won in the Supreme Court. I won on the merits. Yeah. Too many people are. Now we're going to run the country on merit. It's not going to be on influence anymore. We're running it on merit. Okay, so wait a minute. First of all, it's a little disinhibited to say you don't like attractive people. That could be the disinhibition or the impulsivity. But you're allowed to say it because you won in the Supreme Court. What did you win in the Supreme Court? The right to say you don't like attractive people? What, you won the First Amendment? I don't understand. And you won on merit? What, you mean your case had merit? The case was about merit? And now we're running things on merit because we've changed the country. Those are just 4 sentences, okay, that have no relationship to each other. So there's just a quick example of his thinking is the emperor has no brain, but no one's saying it. Not in mainstream media, maybe on our show or your show.
Well, I mean, and you're exactly right.
And we want to be clear. We want to be clear that this is John talking, not us.
Oh yeah. Thank God we have a disclaimer before everything that the views are not of any institution we're associated with. And John, honestly, I'd love to have you back because there's another thing that we have never talked about, because we've talked a lot about Trump's mental state right now. We need to really talk about the nation's mental state.
Yeah. And Stephen Miller.
Because Stephen Miller. Because let's face it, there's a cult-like dynamic happening here. And for the three of us, the three of us, we're not psychologists, we're not psychiatrists, and we would never propose to be. And in many ways, we look at the cult-like mentality from the idea of sociology, political theory, and social theory. And I would think it'd be fascinating to get your take on this new dynamic that has now happened. I mean, we have said here so many times, we are of an age where we don't recognize the country we live in anymore.
No, I know.
And, the question is was this always here? Did we ignore it? Did this always exist, but it was just, put in the closet someplace, and now it's out? And so we would love to have you back to talk about that, because that would be fascinating.
I would love to come back and talk about it. And let me also recommend a colleague of mine, Dr. Stephen Duckett, wrote a book about this called The Hatreds We Love, about tribalism and the cult phenomenon with Trump. You're probably also familiar with Stephen Hassan. He's also talked about the cult phenomenon with Trump. But I think Stephen Duckett is actually a little more sophisticated, actually, in his analysis. But you're absolutely right. And that is we should do a whole show just about that, because
just on that. And if we
the
could
relationship between the malignant narcissist and his cult is really the big story.
How that develops, and if you have any ideas of how to break it. Because the bottom line is that has to happen. That has to happen. It has to be broken. And, you know, us sociologists, we've done everything we could think of, and
I think the biggest problem is the propaganda effect that you talked about,
right?
Because the foxification of the info system is getting worse. You know, Elon Musk bought Twitter. I was battling and screaming when Elon Musk was trying to buy Twitter. His second biggest investor is Saudi Arabia, who is not really our friend. It's an influence operation. Now we have Larry Ellison, who looks like he's going to be able to buy TikTok. Okay. And his son, through his money, Skydance Productions, has bought CBS. And they're aiming to buy a Paramount, which would be Showtime, and I forget the other shows, Comedy Central. And so and CNN has been bought by a company that's affiliated with Liberty Media, and they've moved to the right. And so what's happening is they're buying up more and more of the media. So the propaganda effect is not being neutralized, which is what would have to happen for us to break this ash effect, right, or this propaganda effect. It's being intensified. So it's getting worse, not better. So that's what makes me very alarmed.
Yeah, it's terrible. John, just one more concept, and you could just say yes or no to this.
Because we never can.
Hypnotism. Is Trump hypnotizing 26% of the electorate?
It's a good word. I mean, I'm not a hypnosis. I never used hypnosis clinically, but it's a good word. There is a kind of hypnotic effect in this relationship between the cult leader and the cult follower. But I do have to go. I have someone,
John, we're going to have you back. Brooklyn will reach out. Maybe we can get somebody else also with you, that the person that you mentioned, and that would be great. And yeah, we should dedicate an entire show to that. Absolutely.
Yes. So thank you, John. I guess I'll read your bio later.
That's fine.
Since you've left,
all right. It's nice meeting you.
Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening!